You approve your token, you stake it, you earn a yield, and then at any point you can unstake that token. So obviously the problem there is that's not really crowdfunding, because the whole point of yield farming and liquidity mining is to just lock up liquidity. It's not about crowdfunding to do it with something. So that's where Limbo differs from liquidity mining dApps. There's a migration factor in Limbo. There's a migration phase. So the idea is that let's say Behodler has 10 tokens on it, but we don't currently have sushi listed, and we want to list the sushi token on Behodler. So we'll say for this example that the average value of liquidity per token on Behodler is $10,000. So that means that we need to raise $10,000 worth of sushi to then be ported across to Behodler so that it can list sushi and begin trading without any bot attacks because of an unbalanced price. So what we'll do is we'll create a pool, and this is where Limbo comes in. Limbo will create a pool for sushi. People will stake sushi, and there will be a threshold. And as the threshold is crossed, in other words, once enough people have staked enough sushi that we cross that $10,000 mark, the staking unstaking functionality locks, and you can no longer withdraw your tokens. From there we go through a migration process where the capital is taken from Limbo, sent to the Behodler AMM, and becomes immediately tradable on Behodler. Now, as you can imagine, there is an incentive problem there. Most people don't want to stake their tokens if it means that at any point they might be stolen from under their feet. Right, so we don't want the act of migration to be a kind of a theft from the user base, because then we'll never cross the threshold. As soon as people start staking and it starts approaching the threshold, there'll be a pullback. So we have to design a system of incentives on Limbo to encourage people to cross the threshold. In other words, people to bring enough liquidity to Limbo in order to lock it and then take the capital and stake it. So there has to be some sort of compensation mechanism for people who have their tokens essentially confiscated. Now, the act of bringing a whole bunch of new liquidity to Behodler brings a great deal of value to the ecosystem through positive externalities. It's not just about the value of that token that's been listed, but it's the value of having additional tokens and having all these tokens trading with each other. And bearing in mind that Behodler has amongst the lowest gas of all AMMs on mainnet, so it's about half of the gas expenditure of a Uniswap version 2 trade. So there's a benefit there to having your token listed, or to having your favorite token listed on Behodler. Because Behodler doesn't have any routing, it also acts as a very natural zapper type of dApp. So because the trades are always one-to-one, you're kind of guaranteed a constant gas expenditure if you assume that the underlying ERC20 mechanics are the same amongst the tokens. So this means that if you've got, say there's one token that you particularly like and it's listed on Behodler, and you want to wrap that token in an LP pair on Uniswap, it may just happen that that LP pair is trading as a tradable token on Behodler. And so the act of swapping between your favorite token and that LP token is way cheaper than wrapping it as an LP token. So Behodler acts as a very nice little, or at least it occupies a very nice niche for the kind of migration glue that assists in composability throughout DeFi. So there are a number of other reasons. There are a number of other appeals to Behodler Pyro tokens and the nature of scarcity and a whole bunch of other stuff that's beyond the scope of this video. But essentially, when new liquidity is brought to Behodler, the benefit to the ecosystem is far more than the dollar value of the liquidity brought. And when I say far more, I mean in dollar terms. There's a much higher dollar value brought to the ecosystem than just the value of the tokens that are brought in. So the trick when designing a crowdfunding dApp is to somehow tap into that additional value and share it with the users who are crowdfunding, so that they have an incentive to release their hold of their token. So in other words, if I've got $1 of sushi, Behodler should be able to offer me more than $1 of something in order to take that sushi from me. In other words, I should be able to make a profit off of Behodler. On a personal level, I should be able to profit from Behodler by staking my sushi, because the act of bringing my sushi to Behodler brings so much extra network externality benefits to Behodler that Behodler can afford to essentially share out that value. The trick, of course, when saying something like this is we're talking in abstract terms about value. How do you actually capture that, and how do you distribute that? So that's pretty much the question that underlies the design of Limbo, and we think we've solved that. And because of that, because we can share these network externalities with the users, and because, like most networked economies, the network externality value increases with the growth of the network, it essentially means that the APYs that we can offer on Limbo increase with every migration to Behodler. I wouldn't say without limit. There are obviously limits to the world economy, but the limit is quite far off from where we are at the moment, so that for a long while at the beginning of Limbo's lifespan, we're going to get better and better APYs, and it's going to become increasingly attractive to bring your liquidity to Limbo. And as such, Behodler will benefit, and because Behodler benefits, Limbo will benefit more, and there'll be a positive feedback loop. And the trick, of course, the tokenomic trick, is to capture all of that value and recycle it to the users. So the underlying principle here is to keep everything sustainable. Where you see token minting, it should be done sustainably. In other words, the demand should always outstrip the supply, so that we never get a case of hyperinflationary sort of pyramid economics going on. There must always be an economy backing any form of minting that's happened. And so closing those loops is how Limbo and Behodler work together. And it turns out that because of a bunch of infrastructure in Behodler already, that task is actually fairly easy. So now you've got a kind of broad overview of the challenges facing Limbo. The next question is, how do we do this?